Years ago, on a road trip from Los Angeles to San Francisco, my husband and I stopped at a rest area and slept in the car for a couple of hours. At dawn, I went into the restroom and noticed sheets of paper taped to the mirror. Needing the toilet badly, I went into a stall and only read the paper while washing my hands afterward. The flyer offered a good time, went on to describe explicit acts and the man's supposedly extraordinary God-given attributes, and finished with a chilling line. "If you don't call, I will be right outside the door by the big tree, waiting for you." My blood ran cold. I froze, suddenly terrified I'd walked in on him. I stood there, embarrassed that I hadn't checked the stalls or read the notice earlier, waiting for what felt like forever for my husband to come get me. When I bolted out and grabbed him, we went straight to the car. I glanced back, and sure enough, a man was standing by the big tree just outside the restroom, exactly as the flyer had described, at least in appearance, and he looked at me before quickly looking away. This happened long before mobile phones were common, so there was no way to call the police. Ever since that day, I always check stalls in public bathrooms. In the 2000s, I worked for a residents' organisation on a South London council estate. Poor, high in crime, but with a tight community. The estate had 5 slab-style tower blocks, and our office sat in the basement of one. The other basements were used for storage. Part of my job was to inspect those basements regularly. They were large, dimly lit spaces with deep shadows and long echoes, the sort of place that makes your skin crawl. An older, respected, long-term resident once told me that in the 1980s, a 6-year-old girl went missing on the estate. After a frantic search, her body was discovered in one of the basements. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered. A homeless man was arrested and convicted in connection with the crime. I don't recall whether he had been living down there. The man who told me about it could still hear the mother's screams in his memory. Over the years, other older residents would mention the terrible sounds the mother made. Naturally, that history made going into that particular basement especially uncomfortable. Some staff refused to enter it at all. I left in a hurry a few times because of the fear it provoked, but I never had any supernatural encounters. I looked for confirmation of the story online at various points and came up empty, until, a few years later, I finally found something that matched the tale. I spent a month in the hospital with my ill child and noticed several odd things. A white noise machine toppled off a side table and a lamp began to flicker. But I was the only witness to those 2 events. Later, while doctors and nurses were briefing us about my daughter's condition, a set of magnets shot across the room by themselves. The staff saw the magnets move, but looked bewildered and didn't pursue it. One night at home, I woke with the sensation of a hand sliding down my arm and then a quick poke in my back. My husband was asleep beside me, so I assumed I'd shifted awkwardly in my sleep. After dozing off again, I was suddenly jolted awake by a loud "Mom!" But when I looked around, there was no one there. On a recent clinic visit for a routine check, my daughter slept through her chemo infusion. While I chatted with a nurse and glanced at photos on the wall, something tugged my sweater. I spun around expecting to find someone, but there was nobody. The sweater was tugged 2 more times. One nurse told me she believed me and fetched the child life specialist, who asked me to follow her to a door. She showed me that the door had no lock and couldn't catch on anything. It simply swung freely. The staff said that sometimes the door won't open for a while and that there's a ghost who likes to play tricks. The day felt brighter than usual, carrying with it the weight of a milestone we had waited months to reach. My little girl, only 3 years old and bravely fighting through chemo, had finally entered maintenance. Today, she would ring the bell at the clinic, a moment we had dreamed about through countless difficult days. Since it was a shorter session, the nurses placed us in a room closer to their station, a change from our usual space. While we waited for family to arrive, I leaned into the hallway to see if they were coming. Soon enough, everyone showed up together, filling the small room until it was packed with chatter, laughter, and anticipation. Just before my daughter made her big entrance into the hallway, she suddenly paused, her tiny hand patting at her back. She looked up and asked with innocent confusion,
"Uncle, did you nudge me?"
Her uncle, standing a good foot away, chuckled nervously and shook his head. "No," he said. But no one had touched her. The rest of us were pressed against the walls or seated, far out of reach. The moment stretched, awkward and unsettling, as the room fell into silence. I reminded them of the other strange happenings I had mentioned before, the inexplicable touches, the odd disturbances. This time, though, instead of brushing it off, everyone looked at one another with wide, uncertain eyes. The joy of the day lingered, but so did a heavy hush, as though we had all just stepped into a mystery we couldn't quite name. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more strange encounters, eerie happenings, and spine-tingling moments, make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow along. There are plenty more stories where this one came from, and you won't want to miss the next one.